Welcome back. In 2013, New Delhi's handling of relations with Pakistan and almost all of India's immediate neighbors has left a lot to be desired. And Dr. C. Rajamon from the Observer Research Foundation in New Delhi and one of India's leading foreign policy experts continues to be with us on this show. If the tenor of the relationship between India and Pakistan in 2013 is anything to go by, there is little room for optimism as the Nawaz Sharif government now awaits the change of guard in New Delhi to take any major steps in bilateral relations, even as the DGMOs met recently to agree on the guidelines to avert further clashes and tensions along the line of control. If the tenor of the relationship between India and Pakistan in 2013 is anything to go by, there is little room for optimism, as Nawaz Sharif's government now awaits the change of guard in Delhi to take any major steps, even as the DGMOs met recently to agree on guidelines on averting clashes along the LOC, which was the scene of tense engagements earlier last year with two major attacks on Indian soldiers and their brutal killings across the line of control. Followed by Pakistani-based jihadi groups infiltrating and attacking Indian military positions near Jammu, all leading to New Delhi's alarm against Pakistan's intentions as intermittent firings and attacks along the LOC threaten the 10-year-long ceasefire, in addition to the killing of an Indian prisoner in a Pakistani jail. Nawaz Sharif's return as Prime Minister of Pakistan was initially viewed with some optimism on this side of the border, despite ongoing tensions. And even after Mr. Sharif attempted to internationalize the Kashmir issue, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh decided to meet Nawaz Sharif on the sidelines of the UN summit in the US, though without any significant outcome. The expectations of bilateral peace in New Delhi have been far from fulfilled, as Pakistan failed to move forward on the evidence provided by India on the 26/11 attacks or to curtail attacks on the LOC or from across the border near Jammu. Moreover, Pakistan's long-standing obsession to play a dominant role in the future dispensation of Afghanistan has frustrated India's efforts to find a role in the future of that war-torn country, despite Indian investments in Afghanistan ranging to about $2 billion. The US continues to view Pakistan as the key to any future settlement on Afghanistan, especially after 2014. And New Delhi has disappointed Afghan President Hamid Karzai by refusing to meet his wish list for military equipment and support, leaving the Afghan president with little option against Pakistan and its Taliban proxies, but to fall in line to the pressure of the US and Pakistan on any future security arrangements in Afghanistan, a country that could witness considerable Indo-Pak strategic rivalry in the future. With many powers vying for strategic space in Afghanistan, such as Russia, China, and Iran, apart from the United States and Pakistan, what role do you think India could play in the future dispensation of Afghanistan?
Absolutely, and I think this is going to be the biggest challenge for us. By the end of 2014, the Americans will most probably be out. They won't be in a combat role anymore. I think we should be clear on two things. I think one, India is not in a position to replace the United States. So we don't have the resources or the capacity to do that. Second, I think we also must not see ourselves in competition with Pakistan, because geography gives Pakistan a very historic advantage, a specific advantage there, and the ethnic population mix of the Pashtuns across the Durand line also gives advantage to Pakistan. So our strategy should be to build a coalition with whoever forces around in the region who are willing to fight extremism and terrorism. And second aspect of that strategy must be how do we reach out to all the groups inside Afghanistan, both the government and probably even the Taliban. We must find a way to start talking to them and to see our reach and our influence is not limited to one side.
With India likely to have an ineffective military presence in Afghanistan, will Pakistan get the upper hand in the region by re energizing the activities of the Pakistan army and its terror proxies in Afghanistan?
We must certainly assume that because Pakistan has huge stakes there. They've invested so much of bad money in it, and they're going to throw some more good money after the bad money. So I think there's nothing to suggest that Pakistan army has learned any lessons from the last 30 years. So the challenge for us is how do we create a countervailing coalition to potential Pakistani overreach in Afghanistan. Internally, any Pakistani move into Afghanistan will face some resistance from some groups. We got to work with them. And we must also work with Iran, Russia, and other countries who have a big stake in preventing Taliban from falling into the hands of Pakistan and religious extremism.
With India's attention focused on Pakistan, other countries in the neighborhood stand to be neglected in a year that could prove to be decisive for India's foreign policy goals in the future. And even though Sheikh Hasina's government in Bangladesh was keen to further cement ties with New Delhi, her expectations of a favorable settlement to the Teesta water dispute and the land boundary agreement with India was scuttled by Bengal's politicians, leaving Dr. Manmohan Singh's government little room to maneuver on bilateral ties with Dhaka due to domestic compulsions. In fact, similar pressure of political parties from South India had led the Prime Minister to call off his visit to Sri Lanka for the Chogam summit. This clearly peeved Colombo, that saw India spoiling its coming out party, and the hope of New Delhi exercising greater leverage over Sri Lanka on the resettlement of the war-torn Tamil region was lost. The Chogam debacle also cost India a chance to emerge as a leader of the 54-nation Commonwealth grouping and further provided a strategic opening to the Chinese waiting in the wings to increase their leverage in Sri Lanka. Beijing has already made investments in the island nation, like developing the strategic Hambantota port to win over Colombo. The Chinese shadow south of India was not limited to Sri Lanka, but was visible in the Maldives also. The island nation elected a government not necessarily inclined towards New Delhi, as has also been the case with Nepal, where China has stepped up its efforts to wean Kathmandu away from India's long-standing influence in that Himalayan nation. Clearly, India must recalibrate and step up its diplomatic initiatives on multiple fronts in its neighborhood if New Delhi hopes to enjoy anything close to the influence India has previously wielded in the region. With elections and a change of government imminent in New Delhi, how much can India hope to retrieve from all that it has lost in the diplomatic leverage that it traditionally enjoyed with its neighbors?
I think we've lost a lot of ground. I think this government did so much work with Bangladesh in transforming the relationship. But when it came to the closure, I think the government yielded to domestic pressures and did not move forward, whether it is on the land boundary agreement or the Teesta water settlements. With Sri Lanka, similarly, we've lost ground. I don't see much progress in the next 6 months because the government is going to be in a lame duck mode. And I think the political convulsions at home are going to preoccupy us. But the rest of the world is not going to wait. So I think it is really up to the next government to think creatively, to be able to recover the lost ground. There again, I think there are problems. Look at the BJP's opposition to the land boundary agreement. They're playing the same game, appeasing regional constituencies rather than thinking of the national interests. So we have a deeper crisis at home, the inability of our political class to see what's happening in a neighborhood and to put up a united front to deal with the extraordinary convulsions that are going on, for example, in Bangladesh today. And in Nepal, you look all across the region, that I think we need a new consensus and a new commitment to ensure that India remains the primary force in the subcontinent.
And which of the neighboring countries potentially offers the maximum benefits for India in terms of diplomatic ties in the near future, and why?
No, I think it's Bangladesh. I think purely in terms of its size, it's one of the largest countries. It's been a democracy. And here is a prime minister who's fighting extremism, who is trying to secure the nation's history. But I think we've already let them down quite a bit. But I think in the next few months, as the fight between the competing forces comes to a head, we might see it this week as well in the elections that are unfolding. I think we need to engage a lot more with Bangladesh. We need to devote a lot more attention, because a successful relationship with Bangladesh will remove some of the burdens we've inherited from the partition of the subcontinent.
Well, thank you, Dr. Rajamohan. It is clear that domestic compulsions and the absence of a consistent foreign policy has led to India losing considerable influence in the international arena and in the neighborhood. And with an aggressive China prowling to undermine India and keeping it restricted to the region, it is high time officials in New Delhi understand the importance of a strong and independent foreign policy to achieve India's global ambitions in 2014. That's all in this week's episode of Latitude. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, goodbye and thank you.